Yesterday was another record day for the vaccination program, with 87,772 doses administered. We also hit another key milestone, with now more than 3 million doses having been administered since our vaccination campaign began. And yesterday also saw the largest number of bookings made in a single day through Book My Vaccine, with more than 270,000 bookings entered as we opened up the 30-plus age band. That means 73% of New Zealanders aged 30-plus have now either booked or had at least one vaccination.
Today we are reporting 68 new community cases since 9 o'clock yesterday. There is also one new case in a recent returnee in managed isolation. One previously reported community case has been reclassified after being confirmed as a false positive. This takes the total number associated with this community outbreak to 277. Of those 277 cases, 263 are in Auckland and 14 are in Wellington. The two new Wellington cases are household contacts and have been in isolation throughout their infectious period. There are currently 6 sub-clusters identified with the outbreak, the two largest being the Birkdale Social Network Cluster, which is associated with the original Case A, that has 35 confirmed cases, and the other cluster is the Mangere Church Cluster, that has 114 confirmed cases. The remaining clusters have fewer than 10 people associated with them. Since our last update, there has been an additional 20 locations of interest identified across the motu. That brings us to a total of 495 locations of interest, but only 3 new locations of interest added today. One location, a rugby game, was added today that was pre-lockdown. And we've had 2 supermarkets that have been identified as post-lockdown.
As you heard today, we are in a very similar place to yesterday. With Delta, these numbers are not necessarily unexpected. It's more infectious, and we know it moves faster. So even though we moved into lockdown quickly once we discovered it, we should expect to see the impact of it being in our community for roughly a week or more prior for a time to come. Of the more than 60 cases that were logged yesterday, I'm advised that across all those cases, as you've heard, there have only been 3 new reported exposure events, as in places where those individuals were while infected with COVID. That tells us something really important, that people are following level 4 and that we're beginning to reach people who have become infected since lockdown began. We also know that 37 of the cases were from within households that already had a case. As we've said with Delta before, the rate of transmission in households appears to be high, and that's what's happening here. Also, of those 60-plus cases, our public health team have linked the majority. 16 remain under investigation since the interviews that were just taken yesterday. And finally, I can report that across the roughly 400-plus locations of interest that are reported on the Ministry of Health website, 13 currently have generated additional cases. So that's just to give you a sense that while we do have a large number of locations of interest, and we do want all of those individuals who are connected to those locations of interest to follow the health advice, at this stage roughly 13 have had cases transmitted at those locations of interest. We'll keep a watch on that and look to share a little bit more detail on that in the future as well. So while we've had a number of new cases today, that gives you a bit of a sense of the patterns that we are now starting to see, and that overall lockdown is having an impact. Firstly, we haven't seen spread beyond Auckland and Wellington, where there is a known link to the Auckland outbreak. If it weren't for lockdown, I'm sure we would have seen cases spread further. Lockdown is also having an impact on locations of interest. While our cases are continuing to grow, these locations of interest aren't continuing to grow exponentially alongside them, and that's because people have been staying at home. And finally, we are seeing lockdown's impact on our numbers. But there is no doubt that Delta is changing the way those numbers look. Previously, when you went into lockdown, anyone who might have had COVID but wasn't yet infectious to others was suddenly put behind closed doors, and that stopped entire chains of transmission. With Delta, people are infectious much sooner, and they appear to give it to more people. So our lockdown helps stop transmission outside of households, but we can expect the lag time in our numbers to potentially be longer and bigger. As I said, nothing at the moment appears to us to be necessarily unexpected, but we do need to be incredibly vigilant. COVID changed, and so did we. In fact, part of the reason I think the team of 5 million has managed COVID as well as it has to date is because we've all been willing to listen to experts and we've been willing to adapt. Right now, the experts are telling us to take on Delta differently, but they've also told us to stick with the elimination strategy for now. In their view, it's not only possible, it remains the best strategy, and I totally agree. Elimination means continuing to stamp out COVID wherever it emerges, and all the while ramping up our vaccine program and ensuring every eligible New Zealander takes up the opportunity to be protected. That's because vaccination provides everyone with their own individual armour. Previously, when we didn't have vaccines on offer, we relied on turning our borders into that protection, and when there was a chink in that barricade, using lockdowns to get an outbreak under control again. Our collective goal is to move away from having to use these measures in that way, and vaccines help us do that. No one wants to use lockdowns forever, and I can tell you now that is not our intention, as we have new tools for managing COVID, and we will use them. But for now, while we vaccinate, elimination is the goal, and we can do it. I know there have been a lot of commentary on our strategy versus other countries' strategies. You might have heard me to respond to those questions by saying that I'm not fussed by such debate. For me, and I'm sure many of others, the measure of success in this pandemic is not just what happens in August of 2021. It's what's happened since February 2020 when COVID arrived in New Zealand. Then and now, we had 3 goals. We wanted to save people's lives, and we have. We wanted to try and have people's lives lived as normally as possible. And even now, we've had some of the shortest periods of restrictions of any country. And we wanted to save people's jobs and the economy. With unemployment at 4% and the economy performing at pre-COVID levels, we've done that too. I know the battle with COVID is not over. It won't be for some time to come. And that's why we will keep changing up our strategy with those 3 things in mind: people's lives, their livelihoods, and the ability to feel as normal as possible. And on those measures, the team of 5 million has done an amazing job. Nothing about this outbreak changes that, and if anything, it probably only strengthens our resolve. So to wrap, a few quick important reminders. To date, everyone is doing incredibly well with level 4. Compliance is really impressive, so a huge thank you. But case numbers are a daily reminder that we cannot drop the ball. So please, minimise your contact with others. Any interaction you have with someone new outside your bubble could be someone who becomes a positive case. Unless you are an essential worker, you should only be going out to get food and to exercise. Obviously, if you're symptomatic, we want you to be tested. And if you have a vaccine booking, of course, we want you to take that up. If you're awaiting a test, though, please, no departing from your home. And in both cases, of course, across the board, always act as if you might have COVID. If you're an essential worker, we need you to be constantly checking the locations of interest and checking for COVID symptoms. The worst thing you could do is go to work without realising you're now a close contact, or worse, take COVID to your worksite. If you're isolating and need help with food or anything else, please let those making welfare checks know and ask family, friends or neighbours to get your shopping for you and drop it off in a contactless way. So as a team, we need to stick together and get the job done. And the most important thing you can do to avoid future lockdowns is get vaccinated. And then once we have been vaccinated, support everyone you know to be vaccinated. If you're 30 plus and not yet vaccinated or booked, please book today. We need every member of our team to play their part.